Thank you so much, Sophia, and welcome everyone to our first panel. Very honoured to be kicking it off. My name is Anastasia Kinsky. I'm Head of Programs and Content at Global Digital Finance, a member-led association driving advocacy and outreach and standards for digital assets and cryptocurrencies. I am standing in for Lawrence Wintermeyer today, our executive co-chair, who has unfortunately been left behind by the gods of the internet. I appreciate I have big shoes to fill, but I will do my very best. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists, or having them introduce themselves. If I can hand over to Ted.
Hi, I'm Ted Katagi. I run a company called Kenja, and we service enterprise customers. We've been in business about 10 years. Before that, I was head of private equity for Fidelity Asia. And before that, I was a chief marketing officer for Verizon and Vodafone. But our raison d'etre for our software company is enterprise. It's very difficult to do things well, and we have a visual platform for companies that they can put content and tasking, and we can add a certification layer on top of it, basically. So that's our company.
Fantastic, thank you. Jenna Green at PowerLedger.
Thanks. PowerLedger makes software for tracking energy, trading energy, and tracking environmental commodities, so renewable energy certificates. And we support companies that want to move to net zero and 24/7 carbon-free energy. And we record energy produced from renewable sources and energy consumed so that companies and utilities can be able to validly make claims around the amount of renewable content that they've got in their energy supply, and support them in making it easier to identify where they're at, fill any gaps that they've got, and trim any excess.
Fantastic. Stephen Witter at exchange.com.
Exactly. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being on this panel. I'm Stephen Witter, co-founder and CEO of exchange.com. We're a securities exchange out of Mauritius in partnership with the United Nations, focusing on African market infrastructure solutions for carbon markets, but also to contribute to the SDGs.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sami Benjamin at Jera.
Yes, good morning, good evening to everybody. My name is Sami Benjamin. I am the Chief Information and Digital Officer at Jera. Jera is the largest thermal power generation in Japan, with 30% of capacity and output. And I am working we are working, in fact, at Jera to develop the value chain of hydrogen and green hydrogen, in fact, to Japan. So the blockchain and carbon credit and all these terms we are using now today for the future sustainability for Jera as well. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And to anybody watching, I do want to encourage you to add questions into the chat. We will be sure to get to them however we can throughout the conversation. So really here I want to discuss how we move from A to B when it comes to sustainability and technology. And I think there's a lot of conversation about how we organize human behavior across the board, not just in sustainability, where the incentives come in. And I'd really love to know, actually, Sami Benjamin, if we can talk about whether that comes from government initiatives or if that comes from a private sector initiative, and really what triggers this movement into change and sustainability.
Okay, so to be very, let's say, frank on this, like for private companies, the sustainability doesn't never come without incentive. And the public cry, or the public is the one pushing the private companies, at least in Japan, to be much more sensible and to drive that a lot of items of the sustainability items, SDG. The government is trying, of course, its best to put some regulation and moving, but as everybody knows, like large companies, specifically energy companies in countries, they have strategic positions that these private company change the rules or stop the rules, in different manners. So how to create that incentive inside the business company or the private company, so they go to drive the sustainability while getting monetary benefit out of that. And that is a big dilemma, in fact, inside the boardrooms, in fact, So the public, let's say, talking like the propaganda tells everybody, talking about how much sustainable we would like to be, but the fact is how to fund that sustainability, how to bring that sustainability plus the monetary things. And that question is all the time is discussed. The private, or let's say the public, the real public people, for example, in Japan, when the Fukushima problem happened, so it was the public who stopped the nuclear power plants from being, how to say, restarted until now. So we have a lot of nuclear plants we did not start because of public. And looking at the economic problem out of that, we have a huge problem and a lot of push to restart the nuclear power plants from inside the company, from inside the private companies. But the public is pushing it, pushing down. The government cannot help in what. So going back, the government is not strong enough, or I think in many places, to push the sustainability. It's creating that ecosystem which bring the incentive to the private companies and the public as well, would make companies like work on sustainability much more.
Absolutely. And I think there's a real misunderstanding that we put in laws or regulation and therefore behavior changes, where very often actually when something becomes illegal, for example, it was already socially forbidden anyway, or even economically. But, moving from what you've said here, Ted, I've noticed that your email sign off for your company says collaboration that gets results. And I also know that you have worked in, large companies that have seen different innovation cycles. Can you tell us a little bit about employee and client engagement on these topics and how to really...
Anastasia, can I interrupt for a second? Because you did ask me the question too, and I was dying to answer it.
Please, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Gemma. Yeah, absolutely, Gemma. Sorry.
Thank you. So you were really asking the questions about when do the incentives come in? And in the past 20 years, there's been so many incentives for renewable energy in the form of feed-in tariffs. And that has driven the enormous uptake of renewables. And it's almost become a victim of its own success, because now you have, in countries that have had very high feed-in tariffs and for long periods of time, you now have, 10, 20, 30% renewable energy in the system. And it was an effective tool to drive renewable energy up to a point, but it's actually caused quite a lot of perverse outcomes. And what it's done is encourage renewables to be put in parts of the grid where there's not demand. And that causes issues of grid instability. So it can cause congestion, it can cause issues with voltage, reactive power. Also, too much renewables can cause issues around minimum demand. In fact, in Western Australia, where I live, when we have a very hot day, a lot of sun, but not enough to get everyone to turn the air conditioning on, we don't have enough demand in the system to keep the coal-fired power stations going, and therefore we don't have enough system inertia. So they're now looking at how do we deal with that issue. So there's many issues caused by too much renewables in the system, driven by incentives. And so I think when you talk about incentives, we need them, but we also need incentives that are time-based and place-based. So you want to encourage the growth of renewables where there's demand and when there's demand. And what we've seen in last year is that companies, like tech companies, particularly that have very high margins and can perhaps afford more expensive electricity, have, instead of saying we're going to be 100% renewable, and in some cases, Sami used the word propaganda. In some cases, it could be propaganda, whitewashing, a stretch. In others, they're doing the best that they can with what's available. So I think there is a spectrum, but Microsoft and Google set a new gold standard and said they, instead of being matching on an annual basis their renewable consumption against their actual consumption, they're going to do it on an hourly basis, 24/7 carbon-free energy. And they're just grappling with how they're actually going to do that. So they're figuring out, of the power purchase agreements and renewable energy certificates they've got, does that fit their energy load profile? And if it doesn't, they're going to sell those off, and then they're going to buy renewable energy that does match their load profile in all the markets in which they operate. And the solution that we offer to utilities is really, how do you get those incentives right in the time to grow renewables in a scalable way without causing the problems that have arisen from like very flat price signals and incentives that really are not fit for purpose when you want to get renewables to 20, 30, 40% plus. It's okay if you just want to grow renewables from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, but it's really not fit for purpose. And I think Japan's done a great job in retiring its feed-in tariffs like nearly 2 years ago now, looking at different ways to aggregate that renewable energy and trade it within the market. So there's a lot of innovation that's happening there. But ultimately, if we don't get those incentives right, and we want to get to net zero, we want, if we don't get the incentives right and we want to get to net zero, we're going to push up electricity costs. We're going to have system instability, and actually will drive up carbon emissions too. And you can see that in places like Germany that have not dealt with time and place and built very expensive network infrastructure from the north of the country to the south. And as a result of that, spent a lot on grid stabilization services and pulling in lots of lignite power. And they have the highest penetration of renewables in the world and the highest electricity costs in the world. So I think that incentives are absolutely an essential part of the mix, and we must get the signals around them right.
Absolutely. And I think what's so brilliant that you've picked up there is sort of, okay, we've got this target, by this time we're going to be at X, Y, Z. And through every moment, you've got to then map out the how, and you've got to take a holistic approach to the how, because all paths to hell are paved with good intentions. We've got to keep a really clear view of what's going to happen, what the end result's going to be.
Because if we don't do that, then renewables become the enemy, and that becomes a politicized conversation. Like, if we don't tackle it responsibly, then it becomes about the people that don't want their electricity costs to go up, and they don't want, to lose jobs because production costs are too high domestically. And so, things are going offshore. So I think there's very real consequences for not taking it seriously. Yeah.
Perhaps unfair, because, we need to be more perfect than other companies that maybe don't care about their carbon footprint. But I think you're right. But we're going to face more criticism because it is change that we're proposing, and change worries a lot of people. And actually, I think that leads us quite nicely onto Ted Katagi, onto this sort of engagement on sustainability and how you bring people on board, not just through the incentives that will lead people different ways, but more on the knowledge management. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's right. Yeah, so Sami and Gemma made great points on incentives, not just incentives, but the right type of incentives. But the interesting thing in Japan, in just the past week, I had discussions with global CEOs, major companies, 10 billion plus kind of companies, right? And this is in Japan. And very interesting is that they know the incentives are there. In fact, I was able to calculate the amount of carbon credits they were missing out on. And it's the millions of, let's say tens of millions or that kind of number, right? And I told them, here's the number you're missing out on today. And so you want to do something about it. And the first thing that they said is, we have to study it. We have to understand it. We don't understand it. We need to. And I was kind of floored because, Japan and America and other cultures are different, but Japanese culture, they don't want to move just based on an incentive. They want to understand it fully and what is this about, and they need to go and socialize it in the company. And so this gets back, as you said, Anastasia, to the section of yes, incentives are a necessary prerequisite, but it's not enough, because we not go to a specific company, and in that company, then how do we get the knowledge out in the company that these are the good thing to do? How do we spread the knowledge, and how do we get a system so that the right people are doing the right things? So this is where, again, our collaboration rooms work, is that we put up information in a visual room. You can think of like a Pinterest, but instead of seeing pictures, you're seeing documents. Okay, that's the easy way to say it. You can click on the document, you can view it right there, and you can comment on it, and you can task it to other people. And if you do that, and you set up these this Pinterest, if you will, in a structured way, number one tile, number two, number three, tile, you can see it as a mini process, right? And basically what we do with that then is we can say, okay, we don't call it certification necessarily, but we can authenticate your certificate. So you have a certificate and it's gone through a gold standard or VER, and you've done all these things. But you know what? And this is the strange thing, is there's duplication in the market. Is a CER a CER? There's a lot of different questions out. There's a lot of fraud. Unfortunately, there's some fraud out there as well. And so people are looking for a better answer, because let's face it, you know, a carbon credit, this is the economic incentive, is worth anywhere from 50 cents to $80, depending on what type
of $280.
100, yeah, 100, okay, yeah, even more, right? So you're talking about this huge range of valuation, right? And so people want to know more than what is a credit? So we want to know, is a credit, is it a solar credit, or is it, you know, and if it's a solar credit, is it VER certified? And if it's VER certified, we want to know the provenance of this. And so guess what you need? You need a visual way to show what is behind this, right? And so this is what we do. We do a visual provenance. So again, that Pinterest thing, I have now my documents and my certificates uploaded into this room. And in that room, it's a secure room. And we have one of the top global investment banks as one of our customer. So we went through NIST standards. So it has to be totally secure, because they won't trust it otherwise, enterprise, right? So it's totally secure. We're sharing it with people. And then on this first one, on the certificate, I need to know that Gemma signed off on it and Sami signed off on it, right? And we have that, and we have we have an audit log of this, and we could put everything on the blockchain. So you hit the blockchain, and we have provenance not just on a transaction, but we have a provenance on everything. We're not putting all the data on it's a hash of the content, but so it's not the actual content, but anyway, we have all that on the blockchain, and now we can say, yes, we can prove that all the parties were valid, that all the things at the time were all there. And this is one of the things to do. Now, I was kind of trying to link it to the previous discussion on the right incentives, but in terms of employee engagement, so the same thing occurs on employee engagement, is we need sort of a software tool where people can, without IT spending years on some big complicated system, right? They want to start off for $1,000. Let me start off in my own group, and let me just do something in my corner of the world to do something, and at enterprise grade, because enterprise is where the action is right now, for better or worse, because that's where the credits are going, right? And they have the volume as well. So they need something secure, and they need something where they can do it without IT. And this is one of the things that we provide. And engagement on that is, okay, so I have a tool now where I can put stuff up. Now, if I put it in the room, I can share it internally. And certainly there's tools like SharePoint that do internal sharing. But what we do that's unique to us is we can, with a touch of button, we can put a secure website. So now I have to verify this with a third party. I have to bring in outside auditors. I need to do that. And that's what we can do. And we can bring inside and outside, because so often in terms of at least energy certification, you need outside parties verifying the data. And this is one of those things that's really lacking. So this is how we get engagement in it. And then the final thing is on this engagement is we actually went carbon zero with our company, ourselves. I'm a little bit late, but we're like, we got to really got to do it. And one of the things we did is we said, this should be really, it's motherhood. No one can be against it. It's a great thing, right? So it's like, no, you know what, we're doing good for the planet. This is good for the company, blah, blah, blah. And we were surprised, because what we said is here's a set of questionnaires to answer. and do this, and then what are you doing to reduce your footprint? And then we're buying carbon credits to offset everything else, right? The right type of carbon credits, right? So this is the right process that you should do, right? But then people were like, wait a second, this is an invasion of my privacy, and are you wanting to do this? And what are you doing? And why is Kenja, and we had a little bit of pushback, and we had to. So what we realized is we have to communicate. I thought it was so easy, right? It's because who's against this? But there's a little bit difference. You see it? Yeah. I'm all for doing globally good things, but what does it mean? Are you asking me to drive less or do and there became this a little bit of a pushback on this, and we realized we had to communicate before we just share information. And so go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, but that communication and putting all that information, and again, this is what our product does, is we can put all these things in a room, the visual room, and we can say, this is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. This is exactly what you need to do. We just needed a little bit more information on that and put that ahead of the game. And that's another part of the engagement, if you will, with people, right?
See, what I love there is that you've touched on something that is actually pretty existential, but in a very local and then in an industry-wide way.
Existential, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because
okay.
we see it so much in political discourse that, through party politics, we end up arguing, saying no this way, no that way. As Gemma's mentioned, there are nuances and many things to consider. We can't just all say, you're either against saving the planet or you're for saving the planet. There are so many different conversations to have in between them. And if your starting point is, you don't get it, so you're going to fall behind, then you're going to leave a lot of people behind. And so starting from the point of knowledge and getting everyone on the same, page, you can start to discuss where everyone's limits are and what they are willing and not willing to give up or get engaged with.
Exactly. Everybody has to get on board on their own pace, right? And when you're trying to get the employees engaged in the company, right? And of course, we're doing our own things on the corporate side, on our servers and everything else, but we also want to get for each employee as well, right?
Absolutely. We've mentioned a lot about carbon credits here, and Stephen, I know that I do want to talk about your company's perspective on carbon credit solutions, and especially the token taxonomy framework. But I also want to go a little bit further. Carbon credits have been a really big topic, particularly this year at COP26. There was a really big drive to sort of talk about how it cannot be the only solution. I'd love to know your thoughts about this conversation, the differing views on it, and the role of carbon credits in our drive to net zero.
Exactly, thanks. So we were focusing on African markets, and we looked at, we need to bring market infrastructure solutions to Africa, really engage them and have inclusive finance as well. And we developed the carbon credit solution based and in accordance with those working groups like Interwork Alliance, but also with TSVCM, because as an industry, we're all looking at the right solutions, and we try to implement the right ones, and we did, and that's really crucial for us as well, that we build something that's sustainable, compliant, with proper standardization, and that we, as working group members, all comply with and agree on. That's really crucial to accelerate this process and build a trustworthy system with proper auditing, proper accounting, and that's crucial to give comfort to investors as well, especially to invest in African projects. It's crucial to have a proper base layer that gives comfort.
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about sustainability and being driving towards being energy efficient and clean. But what are the other, the SDG goals obviously are much wider than this. And I don't think that we can live in a world where we forget about, most of them. How is your company looking at focusing on the other SDGs as well? And again, that engagement question of these are all important.
Exactly. So together with the UN, we definitely look at the right projects that we we want to support. So you can look at social housing projects in Africa, or like clean water initiatives. So we definitely look at the full spectrum of African projects that we can engage with and really accelerate and come up with proper funding mechanisms to fund these type of projects. So they all needs to be SDG compliant. And yeah, we are like being innovative on that as well, to create the right like financial products in order to fund these type of initiatives. So it's broader than only carbon credits. We also look at other type of projects in Africa.
Super. Yeah, and I think that point of carbon credits get a lot of criticism because perhaps it can be fashionable to dismiss them. It's more of a yes and point rather than a but or an instead of. Exactly. So as a holistic approach, just like Jenna was highlighting. Sami, again, in these challenges that we're approaching, particularly on a technology level in our drive to sustainability, what do you think the role of carbon credits are, and do you think that there are other more important features that we need to be focusing on? Factors.
So we are the carbon credit and other, let's say, matter of measuring or tracking, in fact, the carbon along the value chain or the whole supply chain is a big issue. In fact, a big, let's say, big issue and a big story, in fact, that which we can build around it the business case of the project, or it's not a byproduct of any project or investment. As I mentioned earlier, we at JERA, we're trying to build the first blue and green hydrogen ammonia supply chain completely from other countries. Like we producing, transporting, using our own transportation, storing it, moving it to our power plants, fueling the fuel, using as a fuel and producing energy. We need to know at every single stage because we are across countries, right? So, and the carbon credit, we go to the double, counting and stories and how we are going to do this. So one of the part of the project's use case or let's say incentive of doing that, it's to have the carbon credit and to get, it's not only on sustainability and I repeat the propaganda part of it, but also really we have contribution, like we need to track it. And not only tracking it, it's connected as well with the certification platform. It's connected to your customers, because we are selling to, we are wholesaler today, and we will have industrial customers, in fact, which they would like to know how much they can benefit or get from this carbon credit. They need to know in their bill, of the invoice. In fact, they need to know it's part of it, the carbon credit. In fact, we are discussing internally here to use carbon as a currency, in fact, which can be used between different parties along the same value chain. It will solve a lot of mysteries around who between the company and the country, the host country, and specifically when we speak about transportation, right? I mean, so you have a tanker moving ammonia, and which country is going to claim like you are, because the tanker themselves, they need some energy as well, So how you are going to count all that kind of things, right? So this is an example of it's not only in one place, it's across countries, across places. We think that the importance being given to the carbon credit and how to manage that one, it's, as we spoke earlier, it's a really great incentive, specifically with let's say global regulations and global pressure and public pressure on they would like to visualize really which company is doing what they are saying, And beside that, what if we do what we say, we'd like to know the bottom line as well. They get or the top line, we get benefit out of that. So for JERA at least, we are looking really very seriously at this matter, and we would like to have this kind of total traceability program and tracking program, including carbon and credit management, certification, and as well, if possible, like exchange. And this kind of things we think we can provide to Japan as at least. We have the total value chain connected, so from the beginning to the end, and we think like we can have a big portion of control over the data, that we can bring our suppliers, our vendors together, and I think this is very important for any project like that to be more than a POC, which I hate the word POC. I don't like. In Japan we say it like it's a POC. How to say? Country, basically everything is POC. But we need to do something which is like scalable, serious, and with a good and visual result.
Jenna, with this
I think hydrogen is something that it can originate from many different sources of energy, and yes, it can transform itself along the value chain into many different substances. And in the markets where they're putting targets like Europe, there's like a directive around that. The credits associated with green hydrogen there are very valuable. And so producers around the world want to credit, you sell their green hydrogen into the European market. And that is the value of those credits is underwriting the build of many projects. It's like hundreds of euros for credits. So it's very, very valuable. And there's a big prize, but obviously we need to make sure that what is being sold is what's claimed to being sold. And that is a very important component, one, for trust in the system, and so that it remains. And so that and those companies that have validly produced green hydrogen can be rewarded in what is a very nascent market. But if you look at other early emerging markets where there have been trust issues, that has really held industries back. And so that trust component, I think, really can't be overstated for something that is very intangibly green. Like, you can't tell from looking at hydrogen whether it's pink, purple, green, or whatever. It's the certification scheme is really what has, and our trust in that scheme is really what has it be green or otherwise. So I think that the blockchain makes it a great use case for this in terms of tracking the provenance of each of the different steps in the value chain, and also logistics as well. So we're working on a green hydrogen project in South America that will sell liquid, it's effectively liquid petroleum gas, but it's not from petroleum, so it's LG, into the European market. And and there's many different standards as well that need to be adhered to along the way. So there's I don't think it's a very non-trivial process, and also it's not just stuff that's being produced domestically and consumed domestically. And I think that is something that makes it very similar to carbon credits and like the clean development mechanism conceptually. And there is reticence because of things like double counting and fraud that have occurred in these other schemes. And I think that apprehension is certainly is valid. And the other thing I would say is that this is around credit systems. The Sustainable Development Goals have been adopted as like a gold standard in Australia for renewable energy certificates. So you can buy a renewable energy certificate that's got the Sustainable Development Goal standard. So you're not like impacting like the habitat of a special bird when the wind farm gets built, and like all the different slave labor, all these other considerations. But something that isn't taken account of is the actual impact of those energy projects on the grid. and whether it's driving up costs or making the system less stable. So there's a kind of like unintended, like, you adopt a standard and you see what works and what doesn't. And I think what we're starting to see now in countries in Australia and in other countries like Japan and Germany, and jurisdictions like California that have a high penetration of renewables, that the gold standard isn't what we thought it was. And
right.
yeah.
And that standard is sustainable development.
Yeah, the sustainable development goals do something, but they're by no means a complete picture when taking account of what's needed for the energy transition.
Absolutely. And on that point of trust, do we trust it more because it was set by governments who have a certain authority here, or do we trust it more because actually we've allowed it to be slightly agile and change to fit the needs as they have evolved or as the industry evolves? And it's the give and take between industry knowing what's best and government knowing what's best is a really tricky one. I've got one question from the audience that I'd really like to throw out there. There seems to be a trend in green markets demanding more for participation, and these demands create a growing barrier to entry. How do you see blockchain empowering green regional development? Ted, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was about to say green regional development sounds just like Stephen's saying, right? Because you're doing exactly that, right? So I could defer to you on that question.
Go for it.
Yeah. So especially what we are doing now with the Interwork Alliance, and that we are basically like building a solution according to the standards set by Interwork, and that we collaborate with each other to set standards and have blockchain technology as like an audit accounting tool. That's the most, blockchain has the most added value as an accounting tool, basically, for us as well. It provides transparency in the market, and that's why we're utilizing that technology in our solutions as well, because it brings transparency to the market, basically.
Ironically, and certainly in some circles, has a huge degree of mistrust as a technology. I mean, I'm still so surprised. Again, COP26, the only mention of blockchain as an innovative solution in sustainability was as the worst for the environment and the least clean. What are your thoughts on that?
Because of the Bitcoin. Yeah.
Why were you so surprised?
Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's why we chosen to work build this on the XRP ledger instead. So we looked at the right way to issue and implement the token taxonomy framework on a carbon neutral blockchain. So basically, it all depends on which protocol you prefer, and especially what Sami was mentioning. Yeah, Bitcoin is the biggest polluter out there, but there are alternatives. So
there are alternatives. There are nuances to even that discussion, and as Ted was saying, there's a huge amount of knowledge that's needed to address this kind of thing, and but huge misconceptions in that. Jenna, did you have anything to add there?
Well, I think that blockchain hasn't done itself that many favors in the sense that there was a time where you just slapped the word blockchain on the front of your company's name and your stock price would go up 375%. And like any early stage market, there's lots of experimentation, some of which works and some of doesn't. And we saw it with the tech stock era. And it's not like because many companies in that millennium no longer exist today, albeit that there's so many that are household names, that we would never have said that technology is disappearing. And I think that now, with blockchain, although we've had that very, very nascent early stage era, we're now getting into a more mature phase. But at the same time, as the price of Bitcoin creeps up and more value is traded on these decentralized currencies, I think there's fear and apprehension around what that means in terms of traditional currencies and centralized institutions as well. And so I think you've got this is like the next phase, I think, that's been grappled with. And we saw that with Facebook and, you know, the creation of its own currency and, you know, payments network that, you know, was effectively blocked and doesn't appear to be continuing now. So I think that, you know, that was seen to be too powerful to be allowed. But in terms of, you know, the ability for blockchain to really offer meaningful solutions to some of these very intractable problems, I mean, we're all working on them, and you know, we're 5 years old. We've got 20 clients in more than 10 countries now, and we can see, you know, in terms of the energy transition, that, you know, there are different pockets that are moving faster than others. So in Europe, there's a directive from 2018 called the Clean Energy Package, which means there's energy communities and energy sharing being rolled out across all the 27 member states now. And that was sort of from 2018. So we saw it happening. But last year we did a project in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest and most populous state in India. They've got 225 million people there. And off the back of this pilot project POC that we did, the government issued a decree mandating peer-to-peer trading across the state, which, you know, was relatively unpredicted. So there's leapfrogging, I guess, going to happen as well. And I mean, you're always going to get, you know, people that have their opinions about, you know, the technology, but notwithstanding that, there is so much happening and it's very exciting. And I almost think that those opinions are relevant. The work's still happening, and there's enough momentum here that this is something that is very meaningful and very exciting, and, you know, is really going to be a positive contribution to society and the environment.
Proof will be in the pudding in the end.
I think one other, one other issue is that, you know, blockchain is really positioned itself as just a pure technology, and it came out as a technology, right? And it's crypto and whatnot. But I think they need to think a little bit more about the use cases in enterprise, particularly, right? It's a great technology, but the problem is that it kind of came out first as crypto, and we're anti institutions, and we're gonna disintermediate everything. And I think everybody on this panel, we're not disintermediating anything. We're going to work with established players. We're going to create standards with governments. We're going to do a new ecosystem on it. And it's not going to be an alternative, right? That's one key thing. And the other key thing is that on blockchain, for example, that's great, but, you know, my mother or the average person on the street, what does blockchain mean to them, right? And we haven't been doing a good job as an industry of marketing that. And so one of the things that we've done, at least, is we say that we're the visual blockchain, okay? And what does that mean? If I go to a blockchain and I try to verify it right now, I go to Etherscan on Ethereum, I can see, and it really looks like a shoddy website, I'm sorry, but you know, you go there and you see the 64-bit character, and, you know, okay, we can see that, but what does that mean to the consumer, right? So a completely different thing, a use case, but we're doing authentication of suppliers of halal food in Indonesia, okay? Completely different, but what's the advantage of that? Now, when they do it, a QR code will be blockchain, right? It is blockchain. Is they'll see not just the 64-bit blockchain, but what they'll see is a visual representation of what does that supply chain mean. I want to see a picture of the farmer. I want to see a picture at GPS tag, by the way, right? I want to see a picture of the abattoir, and I want to see a certificate from the government of what is that. And this is, again, that visual room I was talking about, the Pinterest style room. They could see all that. It's put to a published website, and that's attached to the blockchain. And when you do that, that's a lot more meaning than just a 64-bit hash that my mother can't understand. My mother can understand a website, right? But she can't understand anything more, right? So that's I think part of the other missing link that we need.
Absolutely. I think there's another discussion to be had about user experience and user interfaces in blockchain, but unfortunately, I think there's another incentive question there.
It is.
We are coming to the very end.
On that topic?
Go ahead. We're going to have some.
I don't know about my other esteemed colleagues on the panel, but do you get asked a lot, you know, why do you need a blockchain? Because we get asked this. Hands up if you get asked this a lot. Yeah. And now my answer to this is, well, you don't need a blockchain in the same way you can have a supermarket without barcodes, and they exist, but having barcodes there means the stock control's better, that the till process is really efficient, there's less mistakes. And so it's not like I'm going to this supermarket because it's got barcodes, but that supermarket has a particular user experience as a result of it. And I think with the blockchain, it just makes things work very efficiently, builds trust in the background. And that's important, particularly for new and emerging markets. But yeah, I think, the point that Ted made is, spot on in terms of it's about the benefits, not the feature, the blockchain, the feature.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that we're really just sort of showing that we have here something that offers us transparency, it offers us a value, and it's by nature borderless. And these seem to be things that our drive to sustainability needs global cooperation, it needs streamlined, clear processes. And we need to be able to see what's going on, to be able to understand it. I know we are coming up to our last minute, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to sort of summarize their feelings. In particular, if you could put into one sentence what you feel we need from either industry or government to be able to really grow these initiatives. Over to you. I'll start with Sami.
Oh, thank you. So what we need, in fact, as Ted pointed out, the enterprise has to be fully involved in this matter, and not only the solution or the technology itself. Today it has not been embraced by corporate or it just a few. It's a cell inside an IT. It's a POC inside the digital. Whatever they put like POC or pilot, and it cannot grow. It doesn't scale up, doesn't interface. User experience is very bad. The use cases, we have tons of use cases, and we can collect them by the boatload, but it doesn't work. The management, the executive management, they hear about the blockchain, they use them in their speeches, but they don't know exactly what the hell is that, just to show, like, it's like diversity, like sustainability, it's like a word. Enterprises has to be fully engaged, and they need to be engaged with that startups and much more regulation. We have a lot of technologies. In fact, we have a lot of problems, in fact, around the blockchain, a lot of hype, a lot of cheating. I think we can give you a number of cheating like companies like running the blockchain things, and that doesn't exist, in fact. Oh, we have a blockchain. Okay, so thank you very much, give us $1 million, and after 3 years we will talk with you about our solution. And I have been talking with one of these companies, that famous one, and this is a big really problem. So they got a lot of money from different other companies. Anyway, so that comes somehow, of course, everywhere. Enterprises need to be much more involved. This initiative, like what you have today, which is that the business, global business, council, in fact, it's a hope like it will bring this enterprise together on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Witter, again, 2 sentences maximum, please.
Yeah, exactly. So by collaborating, we go beyond proof of concept through Global Blockchain Council, Interwork Alliance initiatives. We can really implement this technology and have great use cases for it as well.
Thank you. And Ted?
I think it comes down in education and engagement, right? I think there's one thing about standards, and I completely agree, on incentives, but unless you have engagement from a bigger group and then just the people here, right? We need to get people understanding what are the benefits, and then that's I think we'll start to turn the wheels.
Definitely. And Jenna?
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. Most of what we do is around like communicating and explaining like distributed energy markets as opposed to central energy markets, and what that means for like a multinational RE100 or a utility. And so I think that communication piece is really critical to bring forth the future faster.
Well, thank you so much, Jenna Green at Power Ledger, Sami Benjamin at Jera, Stephen Witter at Exchange, and Ted Katagi at Kenja. It's been a brilliant panel. Thank you so much for your involvement. Thank you to our audience, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.